I'm a DJ boy, going to Dcentral, minting NFT, from the DeFi, being crypto poor but JPay rich.
How's it going, everyone? All right. It's starting to fill up. We came in here like a half hour ago and there was nobody here, so we were a little worried. But I am super excited for this panel. This is about transitioning brands from Web2 to Web3. And honestly, these are three of the smartest people in the space. We have Sam Huber, the founder of Admix. We have Phillip Rather, the founder of Musical. And we have Charles Adkins, VP of Global Marketing for Admix, founder of NFT Thought Leaders. Sam, do you want to just give a quick intro as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Huber. So for the last 5 years, I've been running a gaming company called Admix, which grew into the largest in-game advertising platform. So we help brands enter the world of gaming through product placement. So taking over the banners around a stadium, for example, or the shirt of a football player, or even putting a big video playing on a building. So all about non-intrusive ads. We created this whole suite of tools for game creators to be able to identify areas of their 3D content that they want to sell to advertisers. And then on the other side of the marketplace, we have tools for brands to be able to select the audience that they want to reach, the game that they want to reach, and basically be able to inject their products or brand within the video games that they want. And that has grown into a pretty big marketplace. We have now over 600 games, Gameloft, Supersonic, some of the largest game publishers in the world. And on the other side, hundreds of brands from Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and others that are helping, figuring out a way to enter this new media. What's been really interesting, though, is that over the past 6 months, all of those brands have started to talk about the metaverse. They want to go one step beyond purely gaming and advertising and really get into creating their own experiences from scratch, not just product placement into another experience. So we've been adapting our model, basically, and creating a whole metaverse division, which now is representing a huge chunk of our business to help those brands find land in the metaverse, rent it from us, and actually build experiences from scratch, and then integrating our product placement technology and measurement technology on top of that. Now we are actually one of the largest builders in the sandbox and Dcentral, with close to 120 people in the company doing brand experiences in the metaverse.
Awesome. Phillip, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Musical? Honestly, this is one of the most awesome NFT music platforms I've ever seen in my life. So,
thanks. That's a lot to live up to, especially going after Sam here, who is a little further down the road than us. So, excuse me. Just started Musical. Actually, we were building in stealth late last year, and then I officially left Meta/Facebook after almost 12 years. I'll get to that in a moment. In December, and started doing this full time in January. And really, we didn't attempt to say, okay, blockchain's going to change music. Let's go build a blockchain application for music. It was more coming across a real problem, which is people struggle to collaborate, and there's power in numbers, and all of the things that are done by major labels can actually be done in a crowd if they were work together. So our goal was really to bring people together. A lot of that. I learned in the ways that things that went really well at Facebook and Meta and things that went wrong. And so we're taking a lot of lessons of that Web2 experience and bringing it over. A lot of the work that I did there was really about making onboarding simple for small businesses to be able to take advantage of technology. And now we're here going, how do we make it easier for them to use Web3 when they're still struggling to use Web2? So I would preach a little bit of temperance with regards to moving towards just a straight decentralization. We've got some steps to bring the masses over, and I think I learned a lot. I was pre-IPO. Facebook actually opened up this Austin office, which is now 3,000 or 4,000 people. So I've been in Austin a long time. I've been in tech for a long time. And what we did early on, a lot of what we're doing now, and that Sam mentioned, remind me of the days in which we were building the ad business at Meta, and or Facebook at the time, and it was very much about this engagement, like how do we create engagement on platform for fans to engage with brands or so on. And a lot of times you think brands would be the laggards, it's the tech people, but the brands oftentimes are the real innovators, right? When they see these new platforms, they really push, and you can see that in Adidas and some of the other companies out there trying to lead the way there. But I'm excited to talk.
Awesome. Charles, why don't you tell us what you're doing these days?
Yeah, what I'm up to is always interesting. So I spent all of last year as a VP at Polygon. Was there really helping onboard the old school brands into Web3. So the DraftKings, the Dolce & Gabbanas, Prada, all those major brands, we helped them with their NFT drops. And then right around the end of the year, John and myself started NFT Thought Leaders. It was starting to really pick up some traction. Thought I wanted to focus on that a little bit and really not kind of pigeonhole myself to one chain, focus more on, the underlying technology and hopefully an interoperable system. And that's when I met Sam. And so now as the global VP of marketing at Admix, I'm doing similar to the same thing I was doing at Polygon, which is explaining to traditional brands what this new technology can bring. I started in tech in the late 90s, so one of my first clients was Yahoo, so I've kind of been around the block for a while. Just seeing these shifts and these patterns start to repeat themselves it's interesting when you see it, and you just know you're doing the right thing when you can see those patterns. So, yeah, that's what we're doing now.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, well, let's get into the juicy stuff. So, Sam, why should brands pay attention to Web 3.0?
I think there's multiple reasons. I think that, as we discussed before, right, Web3 is really a paradigm shift in the history of the internet. And so it's the same question as why should brand be online in the late 90s, or why should they be on social media in 2008, 2010? It's really about the audience or the promise of an audience that is going to migrate to these new platforms, and brands need to figure out a way to reach their audience. They always want to do that, so they always migrate towards where the audience is or where the audience is going to be. We know that Web3 is a very appealing platform for users, moving from the attention economy to the ownership economy. So if the consumers are attracted to it, then brands should also start to understand this new space and figure out a way to get there. And I think the second part of that is also about relevance. A lot of brands today are looking at Web3 not as a way to reach millions of people, because the audience is not really there yet, especially in the metaverse. It's still small compared to the scale that you can reach on social media. But if you take a brand like Adidas, for example, for them it was all about being relevant in this new phase of the internet, because they see a new movement coming on, they see new people doing things differently, and they want to make sure that they remain cool, they remain hip and relevant. And by associating themselves to that early on, they're able to jump on that bandwagon. So yeah, I think these are the two main reasons.
Yeah, I was just gonna reinforce that, having spent so much, almost all my professional career in advertising. It's very much about getting on the front page of Adweek or whatever these magazines are. So you see a lot of brands will jump in so that they get that level of exposure of looking cool or of looking progressive. So there's a big part of that, I think, too, that really resonates with me.
Thoughts, Charles?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of this. Even when Visa bought the CryptoPunk, right? I always talk about that was a few $100,000. They got $96 million in earned media just from that, and it's kind of just what Phillip said. You get on the front page of something, and it's something they could never have paid their PR firm enough money to give them that much exposure. So they went about it in a different way. But yeah, with Web3, I think the same thing. The original brands that wanted websites. One of the first websites that even got published back in the day was Pizza Hut, and it's like, why? You couldn't deliver, you couldn't do anything. But what they were doing when they started their website in the 90s was just collecting email addresses, and it was just so crazy, because when they finally launched a portal to order pizza and deliver, they already had hundreds of thousands of email addresses, and just like snap, they turned it on and they did really well. But in the metaverse, it's different. And like to Sam's point, there's not a lot of user traction there, but people want to be there to play in the sandbox, not the actual sandbox, but the proverbial sandbox of a new technology, and really get to understand the space and see how these people are interacting with it early on, even though the infrastructure may not be robust enough probably for the next couple of years to bring on millions and millions of people into it. So
yeah, you nailed it too, which is like this is very similar to what's going on with all of the Web3, which is lots of hype and not necessarily all of the tools to be able to deliver all that on an ongoing basis. But right now, chasing the hype just got them 95 million dollar or whatever free impressions, however you want to look at it. So I think there's that. And I think that the other thing, just to finish this question off, is why should you pay attention to Web3? Like if you look at Web2, go back, there was all of these apps that were native to social platforms. So it was Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and their goal was to create engagement. And the reason why they did those on Facebook versus, say, a website was because all the people were already there, and you could spring native code on them, and you could have an experience that was aware of who you were and who your friends are and so on. So this idea of like a platform and native experiences is really what they want, because they want to create engagement outside of the website having to deliver on that in its entirety, because it won't be able to do that. And if you look at what blockchain is, it's just automated code. So I mean, the ability to be able to create these like native quick experiences that knows who you are and what the rules are really what it's about. And so every brand's looking for engagement they don't have to pay for.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sam, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about Web3?
I think there's a few things. There's an interesting point when we pitch brands and we talk to Fortune 500, and pretty much every single brand that is now a client of us on the gaming side is interested in doing an activation in the metaverse as well. So it ranges from Coca-Cola, McDonald's, MasterCard, football clubs and others, really big brands with big marketing budgets. A lot of them don't really understand why they want to be there. And this is what we're trying to really uncover by asking them a few questions at the beginning. Is it because of your audience, or is it because of PR, which is a short-term motivation, but nonetheless a valid one, or is it other things? And then from that point forward, a lot of the misconception is when they feel like they understand it, then it's about the technology and what you can actually do today. So a lot of the brands want to do a 10,000 people concerts, with holograms and full body tracking and things like that in the metaverse, where you could grab the items and put them on your avatar, and you just can't do that today. So there's a lot of misconception about the technology and what you can actually do today versus what will be possible tomorrow. So a lot of it is really about managing expectations. Still do something cool and unique, something that you can't do on other platforms, because that's really important. If there is nothing unique about being in the metaverse, then better do it on social media, because you can reach 100 million people, right?
Well, I was going to say too, let's not forget there's no pervasive hardware, and really the closest thing to pervasive hardware is owned by Meta, Facebook, and obviously Apple will be out there too. So I just think it's really interesting to go straight towards decentralized virtual reality. Like, it's just not, come on.
Well, I think the hardware is a separate thing, right? Because we don't need VR for the metaverse to exist. This is just another way to look into it.
I think that comes down to semantics too, right? I mean, I would say, I would argue Web3 is all the mechanics of ownership and smart contracts and so on. And metaverse to me is like, really, okay, now we're into some sort of different experience other than my phone. So I mean, it's semantics. That's why I always think it's really funny that we're just going to jump right into it. I think gaming has always been always at the forefront of it. So it's interesting to see what you're doing, and also music has too. If you think about going back to Napster, I mean, they were breaking this thing as soon as they possibly could, but now, all these years later, it actually needs to be broken again, which is really interesting.
That's funny, because I always tell people that's, when the internet started, basically with all message boards of where you could go see where the punk bands were playing. It's always the musicians and it's always the gamers. They're always on the front edge of all of it. And I do think gaming is definitely going to eat the world when it comes to Web3. So even if you build an activation of any kind, you're going to have some sort of gamification, reward systems. And the other important thing is, I think a lot of brands need to understand is that they're not going to be able to own your data anymore. They need to reward you in order to share that with them. And so I think that's going to be a big component in Web3, is how do general users get rewarded for their time, attention, and data. So I think brands are struggling a little bit with that. And I think it's just a real paradigm shift in the thinking that, hey, this may flatten our organization. We may have a little bit less revenue, but the experience for the users is going to be so much better. So hopefully they can get on board with that.
Just adding to that as well, one of the misconceptions, I think it's also created by the media and maybe sometimes the way we talk about it. We make the metaverse sound like this revolution, this thing that is completely different than anything that ever happened before. And so for brands, sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming to think, wow, I'm going to have to rethink everything. My whole marketing strategy, the way I acquire my customers, all of that is different. But then you actually look at it and you see that the commercial use case, or the use case for individuals, has been proven for the last 20 years with gaming, right? The fact that we are spending time in virtual environments, that we're acquiring digital items to wear on our avatars, like This is not new. The metaverse is not creating that. This is a 160 billion a year industry of virtual goods that already exist, that has existed for the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So if you think about it this way, actually the metaverse is just kind of another type of game powered by a new backbone, basically, where brands can actually build in this game. So it's nothing new from a consumer standpoint. The product market fit is already there.
There's no doubt. And I think, when the light bulb went off for me was like 9-year-old and 7-year-old daughters, they don't type and they're on Roblox all day long. And they go and wash dishes so that they can get money and buy shit on Roblox. So this is like a fundamental shift in the way they interact with everything. They're not typing, and they're now living in this other place where the goods there are worth them washing dishes in the real world. It's pretty crazy.
And we like to say internally that the metaverse is the user interface of Web3. It's just the actual experience. But all of it, most of the technology and the way that it actually works is gaming. It's just a game. So a lot of brands, we're trying to actually show them that this is, yes, it is new for them, but the use case is there. We know that people love gaming. There's 2 billion people playing games every day. There are tools for brands to enter those games. So the metaverse is just kind of a new term that we created to encompass all of that strategy. But really, it's not that new, and it shouldn't be that overwhelming.
Yeah. No, that's great. Sam, you've already done a lot of activations in the metaverse. I'm curious, what are some of your learnings so far with brands and users from those activations?
The learnings is really around expectations and how you measure success for a brand. Brands have been used to measure success by looking at how many people you can reach, right? Reach and frequency, as we call it in Web2. And generally in Web2, it's all about, how many impressions, how many people have seen this. And even though the cost per impression can be very low, it's really more about a scale play. In Web3, obviously, the scale is not there yet. There's 200 million people now with crypto wallets, so it's definitely growing. But in the metaverse itself, it's still pretty nascent. So the first thing you have to do when talking to a brand and trying to convince them to spend money on a metaverse activation is to redefine what success means. It's not the same rules. And that's also the beauty of Web3, is that we get to redefine the rules. It's not about CPMs and how many people are seeing this, because we know that engagement is not real anyway. I mean, what does a Facebook like mean these days, right? Like you click on them, 10,000 times a day. Whereas actually buying an NFT, committing funds to buy something that you're interested in, that's a much, much, much deeper engagement. So I think that's really interesting. The Adidas use case is probably still the best one today, because Adidas probably has, 1 billion followers across socials. On Web3, they sold 30,000 NFTs. So that's a very, very, very tiny fragment of their audience, but they generated $24 million, right, with that. So it's not everyone, it's just the super fans, people who really wanted to engage with the brand and follow the brand, and that level of kind of granular engagement that you can choose as a user. Do you want to engage by just looking at a post, or do you want to actually buy the NFT and be committed for the long term? That's something that is new with Web3, and just a new way to measure success. Because on social media, if they got 30,000 likes to a post, that would have been a disaster, right? So you have to look at it in a different way, and you have to start thinking about the depth of the engagement, not just the sheer number of likes or comments.
Phillip, what have you learned? Your musical just went into beta, right?
Yeah, so we don't work with brands per se. We can shift the conversation to talking about artists of varying degrees and labels and so on. There's a general, I guess at the first level is what is a music NFT, right? Nobody quite understands we talk about utility of the profile pic projects, but music, now you've got this added layer of I can listen to it, so what do you do and where is it going to be listened to and so on. And so I think there's a lot, not like everywhere else, there's a lot of people trying to do things that are not necessarily for the long term. And I don't even necessarily mean that in a nefarious way. They just haven't really thought this out, that this is a long game to play, which is, if you're able to start a NFT marketplace in a week with a celebrity, then so is every other celebrity out there. And ultimately, this will be a game of hype and popularity, which is nothing that the Web3 is really about. It's an egalitarian system, at least principally. So I think what I've found is probably, music is a little bit later than, say, the NFT of a traditional variety or of a profile pic, and we're starting to figure out what that means. I think when I show brands and musicians that we're solving for collaboration, and that concept is something that fits into their day-to-day world of like, oh, it's really hard just to share files with somebody who's recording across the country, like that starts to resonate. So for me, and kind of building on what Sam said, is like strip it back down, and we did this every day at Facebook. You'd be surprised, like we had to go, we'd get every meeting, but we still had to go out and beat out Google, people are searching for what I have. Like, why are they don't even search for this. They're messing around with dog pics and clicking all day, like, right? So like, there was a lot of that we had to win over in the early days. But you always have to, I think in sales and anything, marketing, is bring it back to the problems they already have, which are, we're using Dropbox and sharing files over email, and they don't play in the cloud. It's a total disaster. I can't mint my own NFT. The system of marketplaces is heavily curated and made for, existing artists and famous people who can go out to their social and immediately monetize it. So it's really early. That's pretty cliche. I heard the guy say it before, especially in music. I just say, if you can tie this back to like business results, that's always the best thing to do, and not fans, right? What does a fan mean? What does a like mean? Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Charles, you've been involved in a lot of different activations at your time at Polygon, NFT Genius.
I think, for me, it's, if you've bought anything at Home Depot in the last 3 years, you've already interacted with Web3. All of their supply chain is built through smart contracts on the IBM Hyperledger. So people don't realize that they're interacting with this stuff on a daily basis, and it's going to be one of those things. And I talk about this all the time. The NFT use cases and blockchain use cases are going to be so boring and day to day that it's just going to run the basic infrastructure of day-to-day life. Yeah, it's going to be invisible completely. 20 years it might take to get identification going on that. But the blockchains and all of the separate blockchains themselves, we need to have some kind of a standardized protocol eventually. And some universities working on that, and hopefully we'll solve that soon. But really, it's going to be supply chain. It's going to be connecting to IoT devices to run smart cities. It's going to be a lot of those things you don't see on a day-to-day basis, but they're going to be part of your daily life.
Yeah, we try to put that in. It's so hard on the website not to use the word NFT or not to talk about it, but it's like, that's just the stuff that runs all these behind the scenes things, like all that administration, all that paperwork, all the stuff that the reason why a musician doesn't get paid, because you're literally like handing things around and marketing manually. And like, I've seen many industries get disrupted already that were seriously heavy workflow and paperwork and like administrative based. So if you just think about it like that, it's that's really where all the potential is, and that needs to be invisible, because who cares about paperwork?
Yeah. Awesome stuff, guys. All right, final question. Sam, what is the best way for brands to get started in Web3?
I think it's just doing it. And we're at a point right now where the cost of making a mistake in Web3 is pretty low, because it's still very experimental, it's still very early. And we also learn from the previous platforms, the previous technologies, that being early pays off. The first brands on social media, the first brands that use search, the first brands that were online, they disproportionately benefited from that early advantage, because at the beginning, there's not that much competition. There's a lot of PR. We talked about the fact that if you want PR, doing a metaverse activation is probably the best way to do it, to get PR today. So there's all these things that are happening when you're early that are just getting diluted over time, where the market becomes more mainstream. So I think that's what we tell brands, right? We're trying to reduce the barriers to entry for them to enter the metaverse by renting land, for example, so they don't have to buy it. They can just rent it on a monthly basis. And so using a service provider like us or others, there is now ways to get started in a really, really simple way, and understanding the space and making the mistakes and learning from that.
Yeah, I would say this sort of applies over and over again. And to Charles' point, I've seen a couple of these cycles now. You get one chance a lot of times to build the stuff internally. Like, the natural reaction would be, and this is not a warning sign against the NFT thought leader, if you will, right? It's really about It's really about trying to take the opportunity when you get a chance to reset and not outsource everything and learn this stuff internally and be a student, because it's very easy just to go, I'm going to hire an agency, they know what they're doing, and I'm not anti-agency by any stretch of the imagination, but like when you can integrate this into your workflow, into your own data, into your own stuff, you only get a shot to do that, once in a while. And so I would say, try to take on as much of it as you can early, be a student, and then outsource the expertise so you can build a composable system where it's like, I've got my stuff and now I can work with them or whoever. You're in a much better place than somebody else kind of doing the Web2 model, which is, yeah, it's your data, but I control sort of everything with it and the way that you operate with external parties.
Charles, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just to make things as simple as possible. If you're any kind of a brand that wants to enter this space, I mean, we're working with a pro sports team right now that they basically came with this request for their proposal to have like a 10-year strategy, a token, a crypto wallet. I mean, there's this entire long thing, and this industry is changing with so much velocity. Thinking 10 years ahead, it's going to be a total, shot in the dark. So we have to peel that all the way back to do the simplest thing. Let's track loyalty on the app and reward people with digital collectibles. That's about as easy as it's going to get right now, because having this really massive strategy this early in a cycle that has this much velocity, you're just going to waste a lot of time guessing, and the guess is most likely going to be wrong. So we just observe, do the easy thing, observe, do the easy thing, and then keep integrating it piece by piece. But taking off a big chunk all at once, you probably have a higher probability of getting it wrong.
Yeah, just one last thing to add to that, which is this idea of like a whole plan like that. I worked at arguably the fastest, between Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, these are the fastest growing platforms ever made. This is by far faster than that. It's by far faster than that. It's every week I think somebody's going to come. Remember when I started the company, I'm like, it's over before I even started because somebody else is doing that. And you just have to realize like everybody's going to be doing it. There's no failure, one foot in front of the other, but it's literally as fast as it's ever been. So planning even a few months is not even really all that smart.
That's what I mean. In a typical, tech cycle, you go through like the creator cycle, then the tech cycle. That's usually a multi-year period. I feel like that's been compressed into the last 3 to 6 months. So we went from doing very hands-on, creative, kind of things in the metaverse especially, and now there's just tools and algorithms and search engines, and like this stuff is happening so much faster than we could have ever anticipated.
Amazing. Thank you guys. This was an awesome panel. You guys are 3 of my favorite people in the space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And yeah. And what's the best way to follow all you guys on social?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn. We're all LinkedIn guys. So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.